Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a refreshing break and a chance to exchange the thoughts on today's theme. We now have a presentation on increasing relevance of FTAs in India's trade strategy. May I please invite on the stage Mr. Mithileshwar Thakur, Secretary General, AEPC. Sir, please, may I request you to please be on the stage? To briefly introduce, he is a gold medalist in BTech. He earlier served as a member of the Indian Railway Service of Mechanical Engineers. Sir, please. And as an engineer with Tata Steel, Tata Motors and NTPC before joining the civil service of the 1989 batch. He also served as the Additional Director General in the Department of Commerce, where he led trade policy formulation, FTA negotiations, trade remedy and trade defense. Trained at IIM Ahmedabad, IIFT and WTI Bern, he has been a visiting faculty at premier institutions. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm supposed to be discussing relevance of FTA on India's trade strategy. Well, let's spend some time in understanding why FTA and what FTA is all about. You know, the global trade has exponentially grown over the years. In last 75 years, any guesses by how many times global trade has grown? Any guesses? In last 75 years, the global trade has grown by 500 times, from $60 billion to $32 trillion. Of course, we have not kept pace with this. Our exports, mercantile exports has grown, I think, 30 times in last 30 years. I mean, in 1992, I think we were $15 billion US, and then in 2022, it was some 450 or something. So global trade has grown 500 times in the last 75 years, as against growth of GDP by only 26%. And I think this has largely been possible because of simplistic rules, the defined system in global trade. You need to thank WCO, World Customs Organization, WTO, the multilateral trade systems that codified and defined procedures. So now the million-dollar question that begs an answer that when multilateral trading system was doing all that well, what was the need of FTA? Because you see, the multilateral trading system brought in by WTO had three core principles. One was principle of non-discrimination, MFN principle and national treatment principle. MFN principle is that if you give concession to a WTO partner member country, you have to give the same amount of concession to everybody else. And national treatment was that you need to treat imported goods and indigenous goods at the same. That's why you had that, if you have excise duty levied on a particular product, you had a countervailing duty imposed on that. And you know that all these, QCOs and the compliance of, IS certification of imported goods, that all, basically you have to give credit to the national treatment principle. Then you had the rules of market access, rules of unfair trade and all that. Now the point is that why did we then digress? And FTA is not about non-discrimination, it is about discrimination. So whether FTA is permissible? Well, the answer is yes, because I think WTO, they realized that there was few problems which I would like to highlight. See, multilateral system was working well till Uruguay round. After Uruguay round, only one round has taken place, that is Doha round in 2001, after the Twin Tower attack. Then thereafter, various ministerials were held. Ministerial is they are the deciding body in multilateral trading system. In 2013, after the Doha round, there was a Bali round, followed by Buenos Aires and all that, but nothing moved. was a face saver in Bali. What they did was that they brought hurriedly some trade facilitation agreement to just put up a show that yes, all is well. But finally, and there were divergence of views. Developing countries were very keen about discussion on food security, on a special safeguard mechanism, on agriculture subsidy. And because, but developed countries were not. They were trying to bring in every time a new agenda. They were talking about e-commerce, they were talking about digital trade, they were talking about environment and sustainability, which were thought as non-trade issues. And the point is that there was no breakthrough, no movement after Doha round. The WTO was not delivering. So there was some kind of a frustration building up. And there was a lot of disenchantment and disillusionment among members because that was a consensus-driven system. And the consensus-driven system has its own, problems. So ultimately, getting fed up with all this, individual WTO member countries decided to go for deeper liberalization by engaging with individual partner countries. And that is something which WTO permits. So FTA actually is a derogation and exception to the WTO rules of non-discrimination, but it is permissible. So multilateralism failed because it did not deliver. It was also realized that the same medicine cannot be prescribed for all kinds of patients who have different and divergent interests. One size fits all does not really work. And the dispute resolution system, there was a very defined dispute resolution system in WTO, but it was getting painfully slow. And the final nail in the coffin was, of course, hit by Donald Trump, when the appellate body was made dysfunctional in, I think, 2019. So ultimately you find that post 2019, the number of FTAs have grown, exponentially. So I would not say multilateralism has failed actually, but it did not, come up to the expectation of member countries. Now, how global FTA, evolution of global FTA, we can bring in three phases. One was first phase, that was 1950 to 1970. We were talking only about tariff liberalization in terms of goods. Nothing, nothing very ambitious. Second phase is from 1980 to 2000, when you started talking about services, investment, and some other subjects. And also started talking about non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers even now, I think, are not negotiated properly in any FTA, but nonetheless that was on the table. And of course, third wave was, I think, after 2000 to till date. So you would see that now in the latest version, you have all kinds of subjects. You have investment, you have SME, public procurement. You talk about regulatory cooperation, economic development, and all of that. So if you see, as of now, I think globally, you have 375 FTAs in place. Between 2000 and 2022, the share of global imports from FTA partners have grown from 37 to 52%. So almost half of the global trade is now accounted for. Now, one of the reasons say that why should India not be a part of FTA? How does it help? I tell you, in 2015, there were 3 mega agreements that were about to come up. One was TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. The other was TTIP, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And third was RCEP, Regional Cooperation of Economic Partnership, in which China, Japan, and Korea, and you had all ASEAN countries were there. These 3 mega agreements were actually accounting for 75% of the global trade and 80% of the global GDP. So non-participation, and India was not a part of any of these except RCEP, which India finally, moved out. So not being a part of any, these mega agreements and also not being part of the, the FTA scenario, there was a risk of India getting tossed out of this entire, scenario, and you will be left out, having tariff disadvantage, all kinds of disadvantages. Second was that, the global trade now is largely through global value chain. 65% of the global trade happens through global value chain. And global value chain is facilitated by FTAs, by lower tariffs, so that there are faster movements of goods. You need to have movement of goods in just, that JIT, just-in-time technology-driven movement of goods. So, unless you are a part of FTA, you cannot think of being global value chains. That was another reason that you need to be a part of the FTA. And of course, if you have your competitors enjoying tariff advantage through FTA in other countries, that's the only way you can, kind of look for level playing field. Like that in apparel trade you have Bangladesh, you have Cambodia, you have Vietnam, Turkey. All of them enjoy duty-free access to European Union, and the tariff disadvantage is doing a lot of harm to Indian industry. So by if you have that negotiation finalized in EU, probably you will be able to seek parity. You will have a level playing field, and it will provide export competitiveness. So, and of course, over a period of time, these FTAs are not only about economic issues. Sometimes non-economic issues are also placed in. Like you talk about environment, you talk about sustainability, you talk about MSME, you talk about all kinds of things. So these are now more, strategic partnership than mere economic partnership. This is the geographical, you will find that between 2000 to 2010, where you had 126 FTAs signed. And from 2010 onwards, I think you already have 177 FTAs signed. So you look at the pace. So growing disenchantment, growing, frustration, leading to more of FTAs. Frustration with the multilateral system, which now, of course, has become, completely dysfunctional. And then you find that who are the biggest user of these? Of course, out of those 3 mega agreements I talked about, TTIP never took place because that was put on hold in 2016. And TPP also did not materialize fully because I think it was US moved out. But these existing agreements, RCEP itself accounts for almost 30% of the global trade and GDP. And comprehensive TPP accounts for almost 13 to 15%. So even with these 2 mega agreements, I think 45% of the global trade and GDP is accounted by these two. Now, what is the difference between traditional FTAs and new generation FTAs? Like I told you, traditional FTAs, we're only talking about negotiation of tariff on goods. New FTAs talk about, wide-ranging issues. It talks about investment, it talks about intellectual property rights, government procurement, trade facilitation, competition policy, and everything. And you talk about non-economic issues also, like environmental, of course, all kinds of things. So I will tell you that currently, you had, I'll come to that later. So you had first PTAs, PTA was that you are giving preferential tariff. You are not eliminating tariff, and that used to have a positive list, that you select a group of products and items where you are giving tariff concession. So there was a positive list. In FTA, you have a negative list because FTA is supposed to be discussing the substantial and the entire trade as such, except barring limited few. So you had a negative list in FTA, unlike PTA where you had a positive list where you are liberalizing. When you moved beyond PTA, new generation FTAs, I told you, you had you have SECA, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. SECA, you had new subjects brought in like investment, it talked about services, it talked about trade facilitation. Then you had a SEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, that was even deeper than SECA. So there you started talking about intellectual property rights, you talked about government procurement and competition policy. Then you have now this CETA and TEPA, right? You have negotiated with EFTA and UK. There you are talking about e-commerce and digital trade. So in some of the new generation FTAs, the topics of discussed subjects are almost 30-35. So everything under the sun you are discussing. And of course, so new generation FTAs were different from traditional FTAs, both in terms of the scope, in intent, in delivery and commitment. Now, India's trade strategy. Of course, like currently, India has 15 full-fledged FTA and 5 PTAs. PTA with Mercosur, with Chile, GSTP and all that. There are 5, preferential trade agreement still in force and 15 FTA full-fledged. So you can see the movement. Mid-2000, I think we started, we had that Singapore, Korea, Japan and all that. Now, I would like to give a caveat. Sometimes we feel that FTA strategy is overhyped, And Professor Jagdish Bhagwati has told that FTAs are actually, are they not termite to the global trade? Because if you really look at the economic point of view, FTAs end up, rewarding inefficient producers. Because if an inefficient producer enters into FTA with you, he will have an advantage in market access compared to efficient producers. I mean, we can give you example. So that is how it is. And FTA is overhyped in the sense that it is, FTA alone would not provide you competitiveness. And I think India's FTA with Japan and Korea is an example. Because see, tariff concession will help only when your export basket synchronizes with the demand of that market, right? If somebody is requires A, B, C, and you end up supplying X, Y, and G, it won't help. Japan is a glaring example that you are not catering to the requirement, not meeting the ethnicity, the design, and so ultimately tariff concession is not helping. And your share in Japan global import is almost 1% for last so many years. So FTA strategy you have to combine with there has to be marriage of the export basket and the import requirement of the particular market. Like India's FTA evolution, like I mentioned, preferential tariff agreement initially we had, then we moved to FTA, then you have SECA and SEPA like I discussed, and now you have TEPA and CETA and all sorts of things. Basically, we are moving towards deeper engagement, deeper liberalization. Another thing, the dispute resolution in FTA, in new generation FTA is much faster. Because even when the appellate body was functional in WTO, it used to take hell of a lot of time. Here, you can negotiate, and then a lot of things. You are talking about rule harmonization. Now, like India, when we have negotiated with Australia, we have, kept a provision that Indian, yoga teachers can go there. So many new features you add to every FTA, and many times, like I told you, it goes beyond economics. It is mostly a political economy strategic partnership. And another feature was that I think till 2018 or 19, it was all look east policy. You were doing FTA with Korea, with Japan, and all that. Now we are moving towards west, and mostly towards you are having negotiation with developed world, like you had with EFTA countries, the all developed countries. You are having with UK. You are going to have with European Union, and of course now we are also engaging with Eurasian countries. Now challenge is utilization. Now before I come to challenge, I would like to discuss that, challenges is, you see, requirements or aspirations are different. Plus you should enter into FTA with a country which has a huge consumption market for your products. Or you enter into FTA with a country which has the capacity to provide you raw material inputs or intermediaries for your manufacturing. You just for the name's sake, you should not enter FTA with any other country. Because, the real benefit of FTA has more to do with the selection of the FTA partner country rather than negotiation skills. And if you know because if you know a country and you know its tariff structure and its entire, all the parameters, you can very well predict the outcome of the FTA. So it's not all about negotiation, still it's about the selection of the right country. So you know that, like you mentioned, small incremental tariff gains for exporters, tariff asymmetry is something that you have to look into. Of course, some of the FTAs have done well. FTA utilization has been a major challenge. I remember, I think in 2015 odd, you know, the globally, FTA utilization for most of the countries were abysmally low. It was almost about 16 to 17%. I mean, it's difficult to believe. Now, of course, it has gone up, but for India, it still remains almost around 25%. As against developed world, you know, there are 2-3 reasons. One is that in some of the countries, you already have such a low tariff that it is not worthwhile, you know, to have that preferential certificate of origin. Second is that the system of issuing preferential certificate of origin is generally with the government agencies. And sometimes that is not an efficient, you know, if the agency concerned is not delivering promptly and efficiently, probably, you know, exporters, you know, shy away from getting into that. Third is that I think some of these smaller players are not sensitized enough. So there is a need for, you know, more and more outreach and dissemination of the information that how FTA can help them. I don't know, these budgets are for me or what, I don't know. So, it's for me only, okay. So now, what, so my talk was not April centric. So how it will, so basically FTA, I mean the list benefit that you can get is right now, I think for India, FTA with European Union and UK holds a lot of importance because fortunately or unfortunately our export is concentrated in a limited few markets. USA, European Union and UK account for almost more than 70% of India's exports. I think share of European Union is almost 28.2% if I am not wrong, and same about, I mean, UK accounts for almost 9.2%. So, and we have a tariff disadvantage of 9.6%, average tariff of course, vis-a-vis our major competitors like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, Turkey and all that. So once I think the deal is struck, I believe it will open a window of opportunity for Indian exporters to basically scale up their exports to the destinations. Of course, there is a room for diversification. Now, charting India's future FTA pathways, demand. So, like I said, that you should not indiscriminately enter into FTA with any and every country. You need to choose the right country which has demand for your products. You should choose a country which can supply you inputs. You can choose a country which has complementarity. You can choose a country which has, you know, convergence of interest. And of course, you should be choosing partner where the diversification. Like you see, there are certain markets. If you see Africa, I think the only worthwhile market I believe is South Africa. I think some $4 billion global import. If you look at Mexico, I think they have another $7 billion import, global import. And Russia, of course, another 7 billion. So you do not have too many options, but I think within the available options, it is better that you start diversifying and not be satisfied with whatever you have, given the headwinds that we are encountering and geopolitical, you know, changes. I think it is about time that we, you know, don't put all eggs in the same basket. So what should be the blueprint for the future agreements? So you should be discussing new products, new subjects, which could talk about, of course, digital trade, GI, sustainability, labor, you know, trade cooperation, animal welfare, everything, state-owned enterprises, food security, transparency, anti-corruption. And you know, so last 2-3 agreements that we have signed, including Australia, and of course UK, European Union, like I mentioned earlier, the number of subjects discussed were 30 to 35 subjects. So many tracks being discussed simultaneously. So FTAs are here to stay, and I would not venture into saying that these have really replaced the multilateral trading system, but of course for deeper engagement, for faster engagement, and for nuanced engagement with the partner countries, I think FTA is the answer. Of course, the suggestion is that when you negotiate, you have to draw a red line. Your developed world is insisting that that certain domestic regulations have to be framed. Now, for most of developed countries, domestic regulations stand framed. So you should put your domestic regulations already in order. Or suppose you negotiate something like issues like support for SMEs or intellectual property. You need to be careful, because if you make commitments and tomorrow if your statutory support is not there, or you are not futuristic enough, you may end up in a problem. So I think the subject of FTA also needs to be chosen very carefully. I think that's it. If you have any question regarding FTA, I think I would be more than happy to answer right now or maybe subsequently. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you in between, but we are running short on time. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Mr. Thakur. May I now request Mr. Akshay Kapoor, Director, Ratnik Exports, to please come on the stage to present memento to Mr. Thakur. Thank you so much for joining us.